Imagine being stuck in one place your whole life, where your biggest wish isn't money, fame, or success, but just the chance to be free. This manga reminds us how valuable freedom truly is, more than anything else. The story kicks off with a chilling scene. A huge, shadowy complex made up of several buildings. The whole place feels dark, cold, and uncomfortable. Suddenly, a loud bell rings through the halls, and a beautiful nurse shouts, "Mealtime." It looks like we're inside a hospital, and this is part of the daily routine. But then the focus shifts, and what we see next is almost too strange to explain. Dozens of patients sit upright as thick tubes carrying some unknown liquid are shoved down their throats. One by one, the same thing happens to everyone in the room. Their bodies are so thin and frail that every bone is visible through their skin. It's clear they're going through something terrible. Among them, a man is counting, gasping for breath. He's at 500, doing one-arm push-ups while hanging, his sweat pouring like rain. Others around him beg him to stop and rest since it's still early morning. But he keeps going. This is Nito, an orphan with nothing but hope and determination. He's pushing his body beyond its limits, chasing something more than survival. While the others laughed and mocked him, Nito quietly whispered to himself that one day, no matter what, he would escape this place. On the wall behind his bed were posters with messages he'd written, reminders that he had a purpose. He dreamed of doing simple, everyday things like petting a cat or eating real food instead of having it forced down his throat through a tube. The same nurse from before returned to announce that it was time for their social skills test. That's when Nito begins to explain the reality of the place they live in, what he calls a rat prison. From the moment they were born, they had been trapped in this hospital, treated like they were nothing more than lab rats, just test subjects. He looks around and points out the strange machines, cell-like chambers covered in spikes. The doctors always told them that they were too weak to live outside. They claimed the tests were meant to help make their bodies normal again, and once they passed all the challenges, they would finally earn their freedom. But these tests were anything but normal. They were cruel. Some were burned with boiling lava, others were tortured using twisted methods. It was clear this wasn't about healing, it was about breaking them. Still, a few stood out from the rest. One person smashed a heavy metal block with his bare hands. That was Musashi, a powerhouse who always crushed the strength tests. Chizuru, sharp and confident, dominated the blood tests. Marco topped the charts in the bone test. And Rina, a quiet and shy girl, always came out on top in the fat test. These four were considered the best among all the patients, admired and respected by everyone around them. Everyone except Nito. When Nito stepped into the harsh testing machine, a robotic voice told him to control his own blood. He had to make it harden and cover his entire body. Confused, he shouted, "How am I even supposed to do that?" Desperate, he screamed at his blood to obey him. But nothing happened. Moments later, sharp spikes shot out and pierced his body. Then came the bone test, by far the most brutal. This machine was designed to stretch a person's limbs to test how strong and flexible their bones were. And yes, it was just as awful as it sounds. Nito howled in pain, screaming that his body couldn't stretch any further. But the machine didn't stop. It pushed beyond his limit until it actually broke his bones. Lying in agony, Nito groaned and whispered to himself, "I've done 500 push-ups every day. Wasn't I supposed to be strong by now?" But the truth hit him hard. His daily training didn't help here. He couldn't even survive the test for a full second. The nurses watched him quietly. Some questioned if he was even worth keeping in the program. One older nurse explained that Nito hadn't shown any special abilities so far, but they'd probably keep pushing him to see what else they could get from him. That night, Nito lay in his bed, too hurt to move. Every part of his body ached. Through gritted teeth, he cried out, saying today's pain endurance test was worse than ever before. Nito's eyes landed on a small box holding 2 precious painkiller pills. In this hospital, nothing was more valuable than those. But he had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to waste them now. He planned to save them for a tougher test later on. As he walked through the hallway, he heard some strange whispers nearby. Curious, he looked over and saw a heartbreaking scene. A man, barely alive, lay slumped on the floor. His body was so thin and lifeless, it looked like he was already gone. The people around him quietly said he couldn't survive another test, that he was done for. With a shaky, barely audible voice, the man begged the others for painkillers. He said the pain was so bad he hadn't been able to sleep in days. Even though he was close to death, he still promised he'd somehow earn more painkillers in the next exam. The men standing beside him laughed cruelly. They joked that he was as good as dead, and once he was gone, they'd take all his belongings. Their words were cold and heartless. From a distance, Nito stepped in. He looked at the dying man and calmly told the others that he wanted to trade his own medicine case with him. As Nito handed over his own medicine case and took the other man's in return, he quietly said, "I'm getting out of here this year." The man looked down at the painkillers, sniffing them to make sure they were real. When he realized Nito had actually given away his most valuable medicine, he was stunned. Nito, already aching all over, snapped at him, "Hurry up and take them before I change my mind." Without wasting a second, the man dove for the pills. The way he grabbed them so quickly showed just how desperate he really was. He swallowed them instantly. Nito then told him to get some sleep, but instead of thanking him properly, the man muttered, "It's not enough." Confused, Nito asked what he meant. The man, with a softer voice this time, began to explain. He said he used to do push-ups every day too, because the doctors told him to. But now he realized that kind of training wouldn't help in these twisted exams. Then he asked Nito, "Don't you ever feel like the nurses and doctors are lying to you?" He admitted he lied too, about earning double the painkillers next time. That promise was fake. Nito, still a bit naive, had believed him. He thought the man was serious about returning the favor. But now, as the man talked about how lying is just part of being human, Nito quietly accepted it. Deep down, he realized he didn't really have a reason for doing what he does. He just keeps going. Whenever someone starts chasing something new, there are always people who doubt them. And soon, you start to wonder, do they like me? Are they right about me? Nito admits that he really is a fool, just like everyone says. He finds it easier to take chances and believe what others tell him, even if it might not be true. With a soft smile, he tells the man that he honestly didn't know the doctor, or even he was lying. He just hoped they were telling the truth. The man looked at him, shocked at how gullible Nito was, and called him the biggest idiot he'd ever met. But their painful, honest talk continued. In a quiet, almost hopeful voice, the man asked Nito to tell him stories about the world outside. Ever since Nito was a kid, he had never stopped talking about how amazing it must be out there. The man pleaded with him to share one of those stories, just one, so he could finally fall asleep. Nito looked at him, then began describing a simple thing from the outside world, bread. He explained how soft and fluffy it was. Then, with a sparkle in his voice, he talked about cats, tiny, adorable creatures that ruled the world with their cuteness. The two shared thoughts and dreams, drifting away from their harsh reality. By morning, the man had passed away peacefully, his eyes closed and a calm look on his face, as if, for the first time in his life, he found warmth and peace. Nito, who hadn't slept at all, looked at him and quietly whispered, "Another one of us is gone." After the man's lifeless body was taken away, one of the top candidates came up to Nito and quietly asked him to follow. He led Nito to a hidden spot behind the building, where all the other top scorers were already waiting. Then Musashi, one of the strongest among them, looked at Nito and said something unexpected. They were planning to escape the hospital. Surprised, Nito asked what he meant. Musashi reminded him that they were strong enough that, if things were fair, the doctors would have already released them by now. Then, with a serious look, Musashi asked Nito if he knew the world record for the 100-meter dash outside of this place. Nito didn't answer right away. Instead, Musashi pulled out a small book, a world record guide he had secretly taken from one of the staff members. He pointed to a number, 9.58 seconds. That's the fastest anyone had ever run the 100 meters outside. Then, in a cold and confident voice, Musashi said that many people in this hospital could easily beat that record. It was clear to him now something was very wrong. The doctors were hiding the truth. Compared to them, athletes out there were nothing. Trying to lighten the mood, Nito gave a shaky laugh and joked, maybe they just run faster when their girlfriends are cheering for them. Maybe those athletes are just single. Seeing that Nito still didn't fully get it, Musashi slowly lifted his shirt. His face looked heady, filled with sadness. What he revealed was shocking. His stomach didn't look normal at all. It had grown into something strange and unnatural, and it was clear that the bigger it got, the stronger he became. But that strength came at a terrible cost. One by one, the others admitted the same thing. They were slowly losing themselves. These tests, the ones they were praised for, were changing them. Their bodies weren't the same anymore. They were turning into something, not human. Chizuru, the top scorer in the blood test, could now control her blood at will. Sometimes, it would shoot out of her body in weird shapes, like it had a mind of its own. Marco's bones had become so flexible, he could stretch his limbs 3 times their normal length. And Rihanna? She could make fire appear whenever she wanted. Then Musashi, without a word, slammed his fist into the wall. His muscles, which had grown beyond normal human limits, gave him insane strength, but they also made him look more like a monster than a man. He turned to Nito and said that if they stayed in this place, they'd all lose what little humanity they had left. The loud sound of his punch echoed through the hallway. Suddenly, a nurse appeared, smiling in a way that felt fake and creepy. She looked at all of them and said, "The doctor would like to see each of you now." As everyone began walking away, Musashi leaned in close to Nito and quietly told him, "You have to come with us no matter what." The nurse nearby noticed them whispering and raised an eyebrow. With a fake smile, she asked if they were talking about something she could be part of. Nito quickly shook his head and told her no. Later that night, the group was fully prepared to make their escape. But just when they thought they were ready to run, everything changed. The head nurse, the one in charge of the whole hospital, suddenly showed up, along with all the top scorers standing beside her. Instead of stopping them, every nurse in the room, including the head nurse, began clapping. She announced with a cheerful voice that their testing was officially complete. The words hit everyone like a shockwave. They were free to leave. No more tests, no more pain. They could go back to the outside world. The head nurse calmly explained that they could head out that very night and start living among regular people. Whispers broke out across the room. No one could believe what they were hearing. The last group who left had gone out ages ago, and there were rumors that they had started new lives and were doing fine. Musashi stood frozen. This was what he had dreamed of, and now it was being handed to him without needing to rig a single rule. Nito, still steady and full of spirit, looked at the others and said with a smile, "You guys really do deserve to be the first to leave this stinking place." Nito gave his friends a thumbs up and smiled, telling them they could finally go and live the lives they had always dreamed of. Musashi looked back at him, but Nito could already feel the sting in his chest. He wasn't on the list to leave. Still, he cheered them on and shouted, "I'll catch up with you all soon." But deep down, it hurt. Watching everyone walk away while he stayed behind felt unfair, especially since he was the one who wanted to leave the most. Desperate, he went to the head nurse and asked about his results. He reminded her that he'd been doing 500 push-ups every single day, hoping that would earn him a chance too. The nurse looked at him coldly and told him that if he really wanted to leave, he'd now have to do 5,000 push-ups a day. Just hearing that made his heart sink. It felt like freedom was slipping further and further away. Time passed and things only got worse. One of Nito's friends didn't make it through the next test. He died. Another, who used to laugh with Nito about building a mouse kingdom, also passed away. And one by one, more of his friends disappeared, always asking about life beyond the hospital walls, wondering what else was out there. The one that hurt the most was a quiet girl who liked Nito. She died while innocently asking him how babies are made. Everyone he cared about was gone now. As their bodies were taken away, one after another, Nito sat in silence. His heart was empty. Even the huge task the nurse gave him was already done. Lying on his bed, weak and drained, Nito quietly wondered if he'd ever make it out of this place alive. Every bed around him was empty now, and the few who were still alive looked like they were hanging on by a thread. The pain, the silence, and the loneliness were eating him from the inside. Late that night, something unusual caught his eye. A new nurse was moving carefully through the hallway, clearly scared of something. She clutched a book tightly to her chest like it was her most valuable possession. As soon as Nito saw the book's cover, he recognized it. It was the same one Musashi had shown him before. Curious and suspicious, he quietly got up and started following her without making a sound. She walked through dimly lit corridors, deeper into the hospital, until she stopped in front of a strange, creepy-looking door hidden in the shadows. Nito reached out and checked the handle. It wasn't locked. The lock was broken. Slowly he pushed it open and saw a staircase leading down into a dark basement. Though he was scared and unsure, he stepped down carefully. The nurse had already vanished into the darkness, but faint voices echoed from deeper inside. Nito followed the sounds through the basement until he reached a room with a giant glass window. Through the glass, he saw two nurses having a serious conversation. They were talking about something called the 210 implant and how it kept failing. No matter how many times they tried, it just wouldn't work, and all their research seemed to be going to waste. What really confused Nito was when they started talking about eggs and how they were growing. Something about that didn't feel right at all. As Nito leaned in closer, he clearly heard the nurses talking about how A634 and his friends had tried to run away. One of them said that if they hadn't come up with such an idea, they might still be alive. That's when it hit Nito. They were talking about his friends, the top scorers who had recently disappeared. Before he could process more, he felt a light tap on his shoulder. Turning around, he was shocked to see the head nurse standing right behind him. There was nothing kind in her voice when she asked what he was doing down there. Her words were cold and full of rage, as if she was barely able to hold it in. Nito flinched, and before he could answer, she started yelling at him. She called him worthless, a failure who had shown no improvement no matter what they did for him. As she shouted, her hand clamped down on his shoulder, and the pressure kept growing. It hurt, badly. Then she said something cruel, that no matter how much time passed, trash like him would never change. Her grip grew so strong that he screamed in pain. The skin on his shoulder tore open, and in her hand was a bloody chunk of his flesh. Nito bolted, running as fast as he could while clutching his shoulder, tears in his eyes from the agony. Behind him, the head nurse casually muttered that maybe she squeezed just a bit too hard. Then she stared at the piece of flesh in her hand and said in an emotionless voice, "Humans really are so weak." That moment shattered something inside Nito. The way he saw the hospital, the nurses, and even himself changed forever. He sprinted as fast as he could, his heart pounding, realizing there was no way that woman was normal. Her strength was far beyond even Musashi's. Glancing back, he silently begged that she wouldn't chase him, but he kept running forward into the unknown. Ahead, he spotted a single door and rushed toward it, hoping it would be a safe place to hide. But the moment he opened it, what he saw inside froze him in place. It was something so horrifying and unnatural that his whole body trembled. Before him was the truth of what had been happening underground. While they were being fed lies about being weaker than the outside world, this secret was kept hidden. Inside the room, dozens of people were wrapped in strange, skin-like membranes, with every part of their bodies connected by thin layers of flesh. These attachments looked like they were sucking the life right out of them, and in the center of each stomach was something that looked like a fetus, something still growing. As he stepped deeper into the room, the air grew colder and the smell was unbearable. In the middle stood a massive nest-like structure. When he got close enough to see clearly, he saw 4 people fused into it. Their bodies were connected to large, egg-like sacs, and it was clear that every bit of their energy was being drained into these strange creations. There was no sign of life left in them, and as he looked closer, his heart sank. It was his friends, the very same ones he thought had escaped and were living happily outside. Calling out to them in shock, his body suddenly jolted in pain as a sharp hand stabbed straight through his chest, piercing deep into his organs. Blood poured out of his mouth as he gasped. Behind him, the head nurse lifted him off the ground with one arm, her voice cold as ice. She whispered that seed beds weren't allowed in this hidden place, and that no one escapes from here. Gasping for breath, he asked her what a seed bed even meant. She laughed cruelly and told him the harsh truth. He and all the others were nothing more than seed beds. She explained, almost proudly, that her kind couldn't have babies on their own. So they planted their eggs inside human bodies, using their life energy to grow those eggs into children. She admitted that they used to secretly hunt and kidnap humans for this purpose. But now, she said with a chilling smile, it's easier to raise humans like farm animals. Then, without mercy, she squeezed him so hard his body began to tear apart. And in one brutal motion, she ripped him in half, screaming that they were the true enemies of humans, the succubi. His upper body slammed into the ground, completely torn from his lower half. Lying there in a pool of his own blood, barely conscious, Nito could only ask himself, why was this happening? The head nurse walked away, leaving Nito bleeding on the ground like he was nothing. She muttered that someone, probably an old cleaning lady, would deal with the mess later. But then, from one of the strange eggs nearby, a weak voice called out Nito's name. Tears welled up in his eyes as he recognized it. It was Musashi. Barely alive, Musashi used all the strength he had left to whisper 2 words, "Run away." But Nito couldn't. He knew he wasn't the kind of person who could just run and save himself. As pain consumed him, his mind drifted to the simple dream he had to one day eat warm, delicious bread. He remembered how he'd always been bad at things, how he pushed himself harder every day, doing thousands of push-ups, just hoping to become strong enough to leave and be free. That dream never left his heart. Dragging himself forward, he ripped through the layers of the egg-like membrane. Even though he knew he probably wouldn't make it out alive, Nito whispered to himself that if he was going to die, he'd rather die with his friends. With tears in his eyes, he cried out, "Don't worry, guys, I'm coming to save you." With everything he had left, he forced himself inside the strange egg. From a distance, the head nurse stood frozen, horrified. This boy was about to destroy everything they had built over centuries. Inside the egg was a sick yellow fluid, and tiny, creepy-looking newborns floated all around. Each of them was feeding off the bodies of his friends. As Nito took one final breath, strange tentacles shot toward his torn open body, wrapping around him and pulling him deeper. When Nito opened his eyes, he was shocked to see his friends standing there, completely okay. He called out to them in disbelief, but Musashi snapped, frustration in his voice. "Didn't we tell you to run?" Hearing that, Nito broke down. Tears streamed down his face as he shouted back, "You're the ones making it impossible to run. Weren't we all supposed to leave this place together?" Chizuru gently placed a hand on Musashi's shoulder, reminding him with a soft smile, "Nito always said stuff like that." Marco added with a chuckle, "Yeah, he's always been the gullible, clueless type." Reina joined in, saying, "But he's also not someone who'd ever let himself become one of those Sakyuti." As they talked, Nito noticed a strange tentacle connecting a newborn creature to him. He didn't fully understand it, but it seemed like his friends were somehow passing their energy into him. Musashi's tone turned serious. He asked Nito if he knew why they had wanted him to escape with them in the first place. Nito shook his head, confused. Musashi looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Because you were our hope. You showed us there was more than just pain and suffering." One by one, they began to share memories, how Nito would always talk about cats, burger joints, and warm bread. How his words made desserts sound like treasures. They reminded him that even though he wasn't the strongest or smartest, his dreams brought them light in the darkest place they'd ever known. Nito couldn't stop crying. His friends placed their hands over his head, giving him every last bit of their strength. Through their tears, they told him, "Your dreams were always our dreams too." Meanwhile, the head nurse was getting ready to rip the eggs open to find him. But just as she moved closer, something stopped her. A blinding light exploded out of nowhere, sending her flying backward with a massive force. Dazed, she tried to understand what just happened, until she noticed a sudden chill in the air. As the smoke cleared, she looked down and saw a huge hole torn through her side. The attack had nearly sliced her in two. Shocked, she whispered to herself, wondering if the birth had been completed. Was this the new species born from the eggs? But why would it attack her? From within the smoke, Nito stepped out. His body had changed completely. New muscles wrapped around him, giving off an overwhelming energy. With every step, he grew stronger, his form more powerful. As the head nurse charged in with a powerful punch, Nito pulled strength into his right arm, layers and layers of raw muscle forming as he shouted, "We're not just seed beds. This is the power of doing 5,000 push-ups." Just as she realized his punch could destroy everything, Nito threw his fist straight into her face, so powerful that her entire upper body shattered into thousands of pieces, vanishing instantly. But as the power surged through him, Nito began to understand that he wasn't fully in control of what was happening. In that moment, he quietly said goodbye to his friends in his heart. He thought about the dream he always held close, the one where all of them made it out and lived normal, happy lives beyond those walls. He collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Then the new nurse walked up to him, leaned in, and whispered coldly, "Welcome to the world of the Sakyubi and happy birthday." Nito lay there, tears running down his face.